Geopolitics and Empire is joined by Kurt Schlichter, who is a retired Army infantry colonel with a master's in strategic studies from the U.S. Army War College, a former stand-up comic, a successful trial lawyer, author of a number of books, and his latest being We'll Be Back, The Fall and Rise of America. Welcome to Geopolitics and Empire, Kurt.
Well, thanks for having me. Of course, don't forget the fact that I look like a hobo right now because I've been up since 1 a.m. I guest hosted for Hugh Hewitt from 3 to 6 California time. So if I'm a little loopy, it's probably from sleep deprivation and, of course, it being California, I'm drowning in sunlight. So
no worries there. I got my radio show on TNT and this podcast, so I feel you. Let's get into your book. It's about to be published this month, and I've been reading an advanced copy. Again, it's The Fall and Rise of America from Regnery Publishing, and I'm glad you're fomenting discussion about something I've been thinking about now for 2 decades, which is the potential decline or collapse of America. And you started the book out by saying America has fallen from that pinnacle of power it occupied back in 1991. And it appears to have landed flat on its face. So what's going on here?
Well, no, I think you've summed up correctly. At the end of the Gulf War, which I was in, I happened to be, I didn't realize it until I thought about it later, which is kind of weird for a guy, who studies history and stuff, that I was there at the pinnacle of American power, both in time and place. I was at the 7th Corps headquarters in the Persian Gulf War. 7th Corps was the armored corps designed to basically gut the Russians coming over the border in World War III, sent from Germany to Saudi Arabia to attack into Iraq, which it did. And there was a lighter corps on one side and a Marine Corps on the other, a Marine and Allied Corps. But 7th Corps was 100,000 of probably the most powerful military formation in human history. And the victory in the Gulf in 100 hours, where an entire nation's armies were completely destroyed. This wasn't just one battle. This wasn't the Romans being destroyed at Cannae, because they came back. They were able to come back fairly quickly. This was taking an entire country out of the picture in 100 hours, comprehensively. And when we were done, there was no doubt who the most powerful country on earth was. Between technology, training, operational preparation and readiness, there was simply no one who could compete. And the Soviet Union kind of looked at us. It was already, it was already on the verge of collapse. And that just put it over the edge. There was just no way they could possibly compete. The Chinese, at that point, about 31 years ago, they looked at it and just said, holy cow, we're not even in the league below America. No one was. And we didn't realize it. Now, it wasn't just military power. It was cultural power. It was institutional power. Interestingly, today I was talking to a young man who was not born until around 9/11. And we're talking about music. I was playing 80s bumper music by The Clash on Hugh Hewitt just to, cause a ruckus. And he said, my parents taught me about The Clash and 80s music. And that's just I'm so jealous that you lived in the 80s. And 90s, and he really should be, because that was when America was at its height of power. That was the last time we were relatively normal in the sense that I understand growing up, where America is pretty much unchallenged, where there's prosperity, where institutions function. And you look at things now. I mean, we're in a situation where gas is $7 a gallon in California, where you can go to the store, not be able to find tampons or baby formula. I did a speaking gig for some Republicans at a country club, very nice country club. And they said, you're totally sold out. Great. I walk in and there were only tables in half the space. And I'm like, well, why? I mean, if I'm sold out, why don't you put more tables? The place wouldn't let us. I said, why not? That seems weird. They probably wanted to. And he said, yeah, they want to. They couldn't guarantee that they could get chicken. Think about that. In America, the last time you could not be sure you could go to the store and get chicken was probably the 40s during wartime rationing, and then not even then. You might not be able to get as much as you want, but you could get it. So we're living in an unprecedented time of decline, and it's a decline that's accepted by our ruling class. And what they're telling us is you need to accept it. I mean, there's a video going around now of Nicole Kidman eating bugs, and apparently bugs. We're supposed to eat bugs because they provide less greenhouse gases. And I'm not even going to go into what a ridiculous hoax the notion of quote unquote climate change is, but it's simply a tool to take power and freedom away from us and give it to them. But the idea that we've gone from the United States of America, the world of the ribeye steak and the V8 engine Ford Mustang, to a place where we're eating bugs and riding on a rickety bus like we're in some the Soviet Union of 1972. It's baffling to me. I don't think people are going to accept it. But yeah, we need to be concerned about the fall of America, because the fall is a real possibility. And it could be, and I talk about this in the book, We'll Be Back, The Fall and Rise of America. Of course I talk about it, it's in the title. I talk about what a fall really is. Are we going to have a Roman Empire type fall where, the central government collapses, even though or something where it morphs? If you look at the Roman Empire in 476, it fell when a barbarian, king deposed the last Western emperor, which is Augustus Romulus, I believe. Ironically, nearly the same name as the first Roman leader. Rome went on for another 1,000 years in the form of Constantinople, the Eastern Empire. So are we talking about a total collapse? Are we talking a change into something that sort of looks like us but isn't? Obviously, everything falls in that sense. Nothing is forever. Yeah, I mean, you have a country like England, which is England, for the last millennium, I guess, is pretty much identifiable as England, though there are obviously the changes and evolutions. But the civilization, I think, is the same. But, will something happen with us? I don't know, because we're undergoing demographic changes. We're undergoing changes in birth rate. We have real enemies like China who could destroy us if possible. And we could destroy ourselves.
A message from our sponsors. It seems we may be headed for the 1930s all over again. Financial collapse, tyranny, and world war. I've already secured multiple passports, offshore accounts, safe havens, and escaped to the sunnier shores of Mexico. My friend Mikkel Thorup of the Expat Money Show is hosting the Expat Money Summit with 30-plus experts that'll help you reclaim freedom in this fourth turning by moving your life and wealth offshore. Themes include securing your Plan B bug-out location, banking offshore, reducing your tax burden legally, storing precious metals, getting another passport, and more. Protect yourself and secure a new life abroad. Register now for free at expatmoneysummit.com, or don't, and enjoy surviving on insect protein while stuck in the metaverse. And don't forget to fund Geopolitics and Empire. You can leave a donation, except on Patreon or PayPal, which have banned us, book a consultation, or become a member.
And one of the key battlegrounds you talk about in your book is this: what's going on with the left, the liberals. Or I call them today. I mean, this globalist ideology, this cultural warfare. You write, quote, you kind of describe them, quote, as the unaccomplished scolds and nags with no upper body strength and blue check Twitter accounts trying to pester us into submission, where all America would be Berkeley, which itself is basically COVID era Australia with fewer kangaroos and more seminars on decolonializing. Chemistry, you talk about things about how it's important, the control of the Supreme Court, which means control of the Constitution. And right now, I think we're seeing a struggle for the Supreme Court as the left is literally calling for insurrection and destruction of the Supreme Court because things haven't gone their way. And so we're sort of in the midst of this soft civil war. And then later on, you flesh out these scenarios of, what a hard civil war might look like. And I was going to say that you're one of the first that I ask my guests often, how would you envision a second civil war? And you're one of the first that really, for me, really fleshes it out in detail, the different scenarios in your book. So could you sort of, talk about this? Look,
let's define civil war. Civil war would be violent conflict of a systematic nature designed to affect political change. And that has happened in American history, though not not often in the kind of sense that we're talking about now. Now we had obviously we had the Civil War, which was groups of states versus groups of states. One group of state, kind of the remaining United States, the other declared itself independent, and they fought, and the rebels were crushed. But we have had violent insurrections. I don't know if insurrection is the right thing, but we have had violent conflict. We had in the pre-Civil War era, we had the war against between essentially Kansas and Missouri, slave owners and non-slave owners, and that was units of essentially units of light cavalry going in and raiding each other, but in kind of a systematic way. So that's pretty serious. Obviously, we had the Indian Wars. I think that's kind of a different scenario, not truly a civil conflict. But remember, in the early 1970s, America did have a low-level leftist insurgency in the form of the Weather Underground, Black Panthers, Symbionese Liberation Army, if you remember those clowns with Patty Hearst, and Sin Q, and all those are ridiculous guys. And we laugh at it. And of course, it wasn't... it wasn't tanks on the street. It was basically suppressed through law enforcement. But there were bombings going on every day. Cops were being killed. People were being killed, not in huge numbers, but it was systematic violence designed to achieve a political end. So we go from that, which is almost a quasi-criminal type of crime wave, to actually mechanized forces on the field fighting each other in a updated Civil War, United States Civil War, 1861 through 65. And I look at it from both sides. I look at both of my experience as a Army colonel, graduate of the Army War College. Also, I served in Kosovo, which had a very big effect on me between 2004 and 2005. After the fighting, I was there in the wake of the Civil War. Keep in mind, and it was a civil war there. Tito kept a lot of the angry ethnic groups away from each other, and we, as reservists, were dropped into the middle of it. Basically, keep the peace, try and keep everybody from killing each other. So we got introduced to the concept of Serbs and Albanians. We don't know who the hell these people are. Their beefs are not ours, but we can't tell them apart. And if you would go and talk to any group, they're very clear on who the groups are. It's very important that you are a Kosovar Albanian as opposed to a Serb Albanian or a Roma, which was the term for gypsies, or a Turk or a Bosniak. We didn't. It's completely meaningless to us as Americans. We had to learn it. To them, it is ingrained and it matters. And you would have a village of Serbs, a village of Albanians next to each other, and they had lived there for hundreds of years. And Tito goes away, and the war comes in large part because I think people manipulated basically abandoned the rule of law for personal power and used ethnic hatred to consolidate their own power. Sounds familiar? And suddenly you'll have one village going next door and killing everybody they can find. And they've lived together for however long. Obviously, there's a long history there, and we would joke about, but it was absolutely true. You would talk to one group, and the group would go, "Well, the other guys, they killed 20 of us," and we'd be like, "Holy cow! They killed 20. Let's call the helicopter gunships. We need to spread." No, it happened 352 years ago, but it's really terrible. And we'd be like, "What?" We just can't. It made no sense to us. But the word Balkanization exists for a reason. These ethnic groups with inexplicable hatreds to outsiders. To them, it seems perfectly logical that they would hate their neighbors. And it seems perfectly logical to some people in America that they would hate other Americans. Doesn't mean it is. But to underestimate the potential for violence in that kind of situation, there is a reason civil wars are commonly understood as the most violent and bloody of wars, because there's a level of hatred there. I mean, in World War II, Americans fought the Germans, and with, some exceptions, when we captured a concentration camp, the guards would try to escape and they'd end up getting machine gunned. Oh, well. But generally, if you were a German and you surrendered, okay, go to the rear and we'll send you to the United States and you can spend the rest of the war farming in Iowa. And we didn't hate, we didn't like them, but we didn't have that visceral hatred where we felt we should murder them. But you look at what happened in the Balkans, and you get captured by the wrong guy, they're going to torture you to death. Because that level of hatred is there, and that's very common. The idea that somehow you are a traitor to your own, it's nothing personal if you're the enemy. It is some personal if they consider you a traitor to your own. There's a huge danger of that in the United States. Now, do I think it's going to happen? I think it is unlikely that a large-scale maneuver warfare kind of civil war could start. But we are seeing things like the response of certain groups to the abortion decision, where they're going and attacking property. It is not a big leap to go from vandalizing buildings to maybe shooting people in the leg, or beating the hell out of them, or maybe killing them. And people have been killed in the abortion thing. That's not unknown. So there is a danger there. And I do talk about it. And I talk about it both, I discuss it and what could happen. I wanted to give people kind of a visceral understanding of what it was, because I think too many people talk about it as hypothetical. And for me, because I walk through the ruins of it, it's personal. So I've written novels about America. I have a series of novels, the People's Republic series, of America breaking into basically having a national divorce, which I talk about also. And divorce, angry divorces go. Look at Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. All right, it's not pretty. So I put in some fictional vignettes in the story because I wanted to explain it in a way where you really feel what's happening. Maybe you're a mom who spent her whole life being able to go down to Trader Joe's and get whatever she wants for her kids. It never, you've never not been able to. Suddenly, if you're in a blue city, red forces do the most logical thing, which is cut off access to the city, block out food and water. As someone who did planning for civil disasters and actually commanded forces during civil disasters in the Army, like the San Diego fires in 2007, I was also in the Los Angeles riots, Los Angeles earthquakes. An American city is about 4 or 5 days from being Mogadishu, in the sense that if you cut off the food or the water, you've got a city of California, Los Angeles is 10 million people. That's a lot of food. That's a lot of calories per day to feed people. And if I had forces, I cut off 101, I cut off I-5, I cut off I-10, I cut off I-5 to the south, and then I cut off the 60 freeway. How are you going to feed Los Angeles? I don't need a lot of troops to do that. And suddenly you have a starving group of 10 million people. Well, there are a lot of people who aren't going to politely stand in line to start. It's going to get ugly. And I wanted to talk about that and explore what that could look like in the worst case scenario, and maybe scare the hell out of some of these people who undermine norms and rules and customs that keep this from happening in America. We're very spoiled. We're extremely spoiled, and we're run by a ruling class that did not build this country. It has no experience before this country. It has no experience with real challenges or difficulties. I don't think they appreciate this country. They think, it's like a Jenga tower, that game with blocks. And they think they can just pull as many out because they've never seen the tower collapse. It's never occurred to them it can. And they just think that it's held up by magic somehow. That's just a natural state of being. And I've lived on 3 continents. It is the opposite of the natural state of man, what we have here. And it requires maintenance, and it requires fidelity to the basic principles set forth in the Constitution by our founders. And that includes, at times, not getting your way. But you look at, particularly at the left, that doesn't get the way in elections. Suddenly, the way we elect presidents is morally wrong and must be changed, even though the Senate. Oh my gosh, we don't have control of the Senate. We don't only have half the Senate, and we can't do everything we want to do. The Senate must be wrong because it's non-representative. Wait a minute. All the small states only joined the Union because the Senate promised equal representation by state, so that they wouldn't be run by California and New York. Yeah, do you imagine that you can just undo that deal because it doesn't work for you now, and your arbitrary sense of morality, which is ever shifting and never constant, and always convenient. Yeah, the necessity of getting rid of norms and customs never happens to the other side. It's never important for the other side. It's only important for them after they've lost something. You just can't do it. I don't think they don't appreciate our country because they didn't build it. They didn't maintain it. They just kind of inherited it. And you know what? Look at Hunter Biden, the power of inherited wealth.
Yeah, and just, we saw an example with Hillary Clinton in 2016 and Russiagate and them talking about election stolen there. So they can do it when they feel like it. They can complain about the elections, but, in 2020, when things go their way, we can't. And, just to comment about Balkanization, in the 80s, my parents are from Croatia, so they're from Yugoslavia. Okay, and in the 80s, as a kid, I went every year to Yugoslavia, Croatia, and I spent... we even traveled for vacation still during the war to Croatia. And I lived in 94 when I was a kid for a year in Split towards the tail end of the war. So I'm very familiar about what you're talking about. And I think it's important what you do in your book is to highlight the real possibility of this stuff happening in America. It's not just some hypothetical situation. It could happen here. I mean, I've spoken to Russians who say they never imagined the Soviet Union would collapse. And then the next day, everything fell apart.
Well, look, people don't understand about the former Yugoslavia. I had the ability. I lived there for a year, learned a lot about it, both preparing and while I was there. It's a civilized country. These are not barbarians. These are not savages. These are sophisticated people. Maybe they don't have as much material resources as the Americans, but they are educated. They appreciate learning. They like music and art and culture. And they killed each other, sometimes in very horrible ways that are mind-boggling. So that's really the horror of the Balkans was not humans killing humans, because that is the normal state of human beings, sadly. The horror of it is a cosmopolitan, to the extent any group behind the Western Curtain was a westernized group that immediately fell on itself in a violent, full-scale conflict. You had tanks and artillery and sieges of cities. That's the thing, because you say it can't happen here. I remember I was explaining, and I talk about it in the book, the importance of an armed population, because I believe that a population of citizens must, in order to remain citizens, must be armed. So it has essentially the ultimate veto, even though the necessity of using it is, it's such a remote circumstance, still possible. And I'm arguing that with some blue check on Twitter. I think it was Josh Marshall from Talking Points Memo. And I said, look, when civilization falls, you need an AR-15. And he said, civilization will never fall. And I'm like, I was literally in the Los Angeles riots. I was literally in South Central. I had to drive there without a gun because I had sold all my guns when I came back from Germany and the army. I had to drive to my unit in South Central with no guns. It's burning to the left. It's burning to the right. People are being killed. There was no law. You don't tell me civilization is a permanent state that can't be altered. That's ridiculous. That's a lie, and it's a dangerous lie. And it's a lie people tell themselves because they don't want to do the hard work of citizenship, which is being a participant in your own government, including its defense when necessary. But I think the Swiss model and the Israeli model have a lot of value. I don't know if I'm a national conscription guy or a national service guy. I got some issues with that, mostly as a practical matter, because as a soldier, I'd much rather have volunteers, because you can threaten to throw them out, and instead of going, oh, good, they go, oh, no, I'll behave. But there is something for people taking citizenship seriously. And when you understand that, if everything goes to hell, you might have to strap on a rifle and personally stand on a corner and maintain security in your neighborhood, maybe that focuses you on and makes you appreciate things a little more.
And before kind of ending on the positive note of what we can do, I just wanted to, before time runs out, just get your thought on the economy and, this new Cold War, because we're declining economically, inflation, money printing, devaluation of currency. Americans are fleeing to Texas and Florida and down here to Mexico like crazy. And then you start the book discussing how in the 90s in Iraq, we were at the pinnacle, and I'm reading Putin today. I mean, he's calling our bluff, and Putin's saying, "Come at me, bro." It's like they're not afraid anymore. The Russians and the Chinese, they've got hypersonics, we don't, and so economically and militarily, I don't think we're in a good situation either.
Well, I think you're right. I wrote an article for Town Hall that said, the establishment's sad that it's can't get sufficient cannon fodder for its war machine. And I'm pro-American war machine. I was in 27 years. I love the American military. American military is a mess now. The thing is, all these problems can be solved with proper leadership and a proper understanding. If you have a military concerned about war fighting instead of bizarre social engineering, that can be fixed pretty quickly. It's a hierarchical organization. People are like, I don't believe, how can the military turn liberal and progressive? Well, because the commander did. Militaries do what the commander tells it to do. And if a military's primary focus is wokeness, you're gonna have a woke military, but it can't fight its way out of a paper bag. And the fact that we ended up leaving Afghanistan with our tail between our legs with 13 metallic boxes containing Marines who should not have been killed, and we're only killed because of the gross incompetence of senior leadership, that's the result. But it can change very quickly. You get a proper leader who insists to focus be war fighting. We're going to get back pretty quickly, and I think we'll get our technical edge back too. I am respectful and concerned about the Russians and the Chinese. The Russians are smart people. They are a worthy adversary. I was in the Cold War at the end of it. I, cut my teeth learning to fight Russians. And I also trained Ukrainians in Ukraine 4 times. So I have a little knowledge of that. I do respect them. I think anybody who dismisses them is foolish. But I think if not for Iraq, I would think that the failure to bring the Russians into the West and allied with us kind of against China or as a counterbalance to China, because I don't necessarily think we must, be adversaries with China in that case. We'll always be competitors. We don't necessarily need to be hostile, but the failure to bring Russia around and enlist them in the West, in large part, recently because, the threat of Russia became useful for leftist Americans as a bludgeon against the Americans who had been the strongest opponents of Russia when it was in the Soviet Union form. A huge mistake. China, China is a great nation. It is one of the great nations of the world. It is a great civilization. It is a civilization that is not known for its military prowess, does not have the military history a lot of other countries do. When it won, obviously Sun Tzu was Chinese, and they do have a lot of good military thought. But, this is not like the Roman army. These guys do not have the long tradition of victory that other countries do. But they do have a lot of anger over humiliation by the West. As a great nation, to be humbled, especially during the 19th century, early 20th century, by Western powers, basically slicing you up like a Christmas goose. You have a very angry nation. You also have a large number of males who will never have brides because of their one China policy, led to a large number of females missing from the current cohort. So that's a recipe for disaster. But there's a tension in China because they want to use free enterprise as a tool to increase prosperity. And their deal is we'll allow some level of free enterprise to increase prosperity, but you're going to give up your freedom. And the Chinese, who are fully aware of freedom, because so many Chinese come to America, deal with the West, they understand what freedom is. But, they made a deal that makes sense to them, which is we'll give up some of our freedom. We'll let the Communist Party have the political power, but you've got to make us rich. What happens when the Communist Party's natural tendency towards aggregating power interferes with the free enterprise, focus? which leads to economic problems, which there are going to be. I think the Chinese, particularly the Chinese real estate market, is a house of straw. What happens when that all falls apart and there is no more prosperity? America can weather a depression. It has, because our system is not based on, at least it wasn't before, we'll give you stuff if you're good and obedient. You'll be prosperous. Instead, it's, well, we'll have good times and bad times, but we'll muddle through using the Constitution. In China, if the government doesn't keep its part of the deal, and you have these other volatile factors that I've mentioned, that's a big problem for them, and they may get desperate. So China is a worthy opponent. They are smart people. They are tough people. You shouldn't underestimate them. But they have huge problems. So, yeah, I don't believe it is a done deal that we will lose to China. And I think, you talk about how do we deal with our economic problems. 3 years ago, our economy was doing great. You had Donald Trump, and in 3 years, he basically took the thumb off the economy of the state to not even a great extent, just a little extent, and our economy just exploded. That can happen again. It happens every time. Ronald Reagan did in the 80s. To some extent, Bill Clinton did it in the 90s. But of course, he was forced to.
Mm-hmm.
So we know what the answer is. So you get a smart president in, and I talk about the 2024 election and what needs to be done. He has a smart president in here. He unleashes the economy. So you're going to have an economic boom. He focuses on fixing institutions, starting with the military. It's important because the military is the most important, and it's the easiest to fix. So you get a big win quickly. And we can turn around fairly quickly. The question is whether it'll be superficial or lasting. Will we recommit to the values of the founders, or will it just be kind of a temporary, like Trump has proven to be, kind of a temporary respite from a long decline, long managed decline? I think it could go either way.
I think you nail it when you say that, quote, aggression, risk-taking, and stubborn independence are the keys to greatness, end quote. And
yes,
that's something I've always carried with me my whole life. As an American, again, the book is We'll Be Back, The Fall and Rise of America. Where's the best place to find you online?
Well, you can find me at Twitter, Kurt Schlichter, spelled just like it sounds. Read my town hall columns every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You can get the book, We'll Be Back, The Fall and Rise of America. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever. It drops on July 12th. And I got to say, it's, look, I was, besides a War College grad, I was also a stand-up comic. I tried not to make it a drudgery, a Bataan death march of, as Locke once observed. Now, I'm used to talking to juries. I'm used to talking to soldiers. I'm used to being clear and concise. And that's what I want to do. I want to talk to people and say, look, here's what my experience, here's my analysis based on my experience. You may agree, you may disagree. I want every line to either get a laugh or provoke a thought.
No, I read it quickly. It was an easy read. Very, I love the fictional aspects that help visualize everything. I highly recommend the book. Again, get it at Regnery Publishing or everywhere else. And thank you for being on Geopolitics and Empire.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
I hope you enjoyed this Geopolitics and Empire podcast. The website is geopoliticsandempire.com, and I encourage you to sign up for the free email list that goes out with each podcast and every weekend with a collection of news headlines. The newsletter and website are our last lines of defense. We're being censored and deplatformed. It's nearly impossible to find Geopolitics and Empire on the Google search engine. We've been blacklisted. YouTube frequently takes down our videos with strikes. Facebook restricts our page. Reddit and Twitter take down posts. And after the Associated Press mentioned Geopolitics and Empire in a 2021 article co-written with NATO, our Patreon account was terminated. Vimeo also terminated our Pro account. The best free way to help Geopolitics and Empire is to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or elsewhere and subscribe to all of our media channels. You can find the video broadcast now on 5 platforms: Odyssey, Rockfin, Rumble, BitChute, and Brighteon. You can find the audio broadcast on the podcast ecosystem: SoundCloud, Apple, Spotify, and so on. My current favorite social media channels are Twitter and Telegram, but you can also find us on Gab, MeWe, Minds, Float, VK, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Finally, Geopolitics and Empire is in dire need of funding to continue. You can leave a donation, purchase a consultation with the host, or become a member to receive additional benefits. We also produce a weekly broadcast called Dissident Thinker for members and Rockfin subscribers only. We will continue to fight the good fight come hell or high water. Thank you for listening.